Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to Noob Hardcore Videogamer episode 3. And get ready to greenlit all the great contents that we'll be featuring today. But first, let me check if the camera is recording correctly. Let's use this as a focus test and say alright. Okay, let's correct a little bit the angle and get ready to start. Now, I was a little bit unsure on how to continue the series, and that's one of the interesting topics. You can very well include some personal discussions and comments on video series in general. It's not going to harm in any way the final outcome of this series, independently of how far it manages to get. Now, initially I was thinking that the third episode, this one would be something special where I would speak explicitly and I'd make a more coherent than average episode in which I try to discuss, at least outline in a coherent way, what can be learned from playing 3D video games and what I personally managed to learn from them, and what details have to be looked at, mainly to manage to learn as much from them as possible. And also discussing clearly which are those three-dimensional games, or what are the features that a certain three-dimensional video game must have in order that it's possible to learn really a lot from it. Clearly this is not a handbook which tries to give a coherent reference divided in chapters on a certain topic, where each chapter tries to cover, at least to roughly outline, but with as much stress as possible, to outline each branch of a certain topic, so that each chapter forms a sort of ready-to-use module. Such an endeavor is just too much for a video series, and I thought that since this is not writing, we are not writing a handbook on a specialistic subject. Let's just, so to speak, relax, soften the constraints that we are under the effect of. Now, in first place, I wanted a little bit to revise on paper. I had a little bit roughly, but well, enough spontaneously, I've tried to outline on linear optics and the simulation of lighting and shadows in the linear optics regime, and so on. This is an endeavor which can be undertaken safely in a video of not 15 but 30 minutes, not more, 40 minutes, so as to fit as well the discussions that just came spontaneously to mind when I realized that most important thing is not to make each chapter, each episode of this this series, to cover a whole branch of a certain subject in a manner as coherent as possible, but the most important thing is that the series fucking continues, and we are talking now about content. You know, there are different schools of thought on how to make a video series. The most followed school of thought is that we start from the void. We take an imaginary void box and we start throwing it all the shit, and when there's enough shit we start to subdivide it into chapters and forge one shitty episode after the other, as if episodes were bullets coming out of the tube of a machine gun. And well, essentially this school of thought just throws it all on solves everything, so to speak. Features as a main approach, in still other words, that of forging fucking details and attaching them to an almost non-existent basic concept. It is one very simple idea, which is then grew by attaching details and just it's all cut into a nicely packed episodes, and all of them tend to suck as bad as hell. Now the other school of thought, which is the one I'm more close to, is that we start off by having already thousands of fantastic ideas and enlightening ideas, if possible, which are already all interconnected. And we check if these interconnected ideas can form or can meet to form a whole complete framework to just forge anytime a fantastic next episode, of which, even if there are only 10 or 100, each of them kicks ass as bad as fuck, as if they were giant bullets coming out a futuristic fucking machine gun of the type that we see in many video games that we will be seeing together a lot to come in the next episodes, and maybe also in this, but now this time is more about a personal discussion. Now, the second one is the school of thought that I follow. There's discussion of how much one can learn from video games, and what I personally learned is something that I had in mind. I realized how much I had learned and how much others as well have learned from playing three-dimensional video games. Well, I had these ideas for years, or even more than 10 years, but I thought that, well, it's that it would be quite risky to start making a series of videos on them, because people would say and would think that I'm a childish chicken motherfucker because I just been playing video games all the time and done nothing. But yeah, now as we came to a point where I can safely just protect myself against all this through the curriculum, clearly, a really convinced nerd, thousands of ideas, interrelated details came out, a whole framework from which to just drain excellent content and to make something. That's just maybe let's give a name to this approach. It's more the East European kind of approach, typically. But I don't know. I am not able to prove it for sure. The most important thing is that anyway, this or that school of thought, the basic approach is relying on. Most important thing is that the series fucking continues and arrives at least to some episodes, at least 10 or so. Yeah, we were talking about video games as well, weren't we? So, well, on this old computer here that I showed you the other time, there are lots of video games. Most of them are great and are among the hardest games ever. And there are different genres of it. And I can still manage with some effort to recover even more of them. And there's a lot of material to work on, to show things and everything, but I wanted to revise some linear optics and its simulation procedurally, kind of thing that we see in some modern three-dimensional video games. That I promised it to you. Anyway, what games to introduce now after the revised part? I was uncertain. About one I was sure. The other I don't know. In fact, the most interesting thing that I was thinking is that one of the two games is I'll be introducing it, but I won't show it. I will show it after next, so that we have the surprise of having a description, but we haven't the game shown directly. But then we will be comfortably able to really just start off with a gameplay of the video game, and then to just point out a little bit, revise what we have been saying about it. The next games will be Quake 2, a rather underestimated game, but which is, in my opinion, great, even if it's clearly one of the most, one of the games featuring some of the most disgusting scenes, of which I'm going to show no. We'll limit the visual illustration only to neutral parts, which are just great to see. And just to say to you, just a first impression, beside the fact that the graphics are great. The sound is impressive in full stereo. It's a mouse-controlled game, but also the other game that we'll be talking about and maybe showing at the end of this episode is mouse-controlled partly. Also, Quake 2 is partly mouse-controlled. It's a first-person shooter. Came out in 1997, to be exact. And, well, it has the most basic kind of old-school lighting system, but I think that with just a little enhancement on that, if there had been like something like a torchlight to cast directional light on different things of the scenario, there had been at least some minimal. There had been behind a kind of lighting procedure, lighting simulation procedure that tries at least to give an illusion of shadows. Just that game would be just half a step beyond another game that came out many years later, which is Doom 3, which has a fully functional lighting and shadowing procedure in it. And to be more exact, shadowing can be enabled and disabled, and the two cases can be interesting to confront. Okay, the other game is a sort of vehicle truck simulator, but where we have already a major step forward, that there are lighting effects to some extent. It's actually not part of the game, so I even don't know if I can come up with any examples of lighting there. But there is something more interesting to us to extend the previously outlined topics, and that is simulation of mirroring approximator. He also outlined what it would mean an exact, at least in the clearly in the linear geometrical regime. Simulation of mirroring. We have mirroring also in Doom 3, so that's fine. But let's just stick to this thing so far outlined. Okay. Now let me take the camera and revise a bit these things of optics previously outlined, and what is it meant by fully old school lighting, second generation old school lighting, which already tries to get along with shadows, but in a very approximate way, sometimes in a way that even just doesn't evoke in any way to the player the idea that, yeah, there are sharp shadows cast by a light source of whose effect is not just mixed with the effect of too many other strong light sources, and finally the modern generation, third generation lighting simulation, which does also full sharp shadow simulation, even if it's based on an approximate approach, and we'll be seeing that. Polygonal shadowing is an option for particular cases or for scientific engineering topics, but it's in most of the cases it's extremely slow, and yeah, that's really just, it's something that a little bit, most of the times it just overshoots the mark a little bit. It does more than actually it's really meaningful to go as far. So, okay, we have enough time to do this little revise of different approaches to lighting and shadowing simulation. Now, let us profit from daylight to record this little revise of linear optics, also called geometric optics, from whose assumptions we will quickly come to a basic understanding of how to try to arrive at a geometric kind of lighting and shadowing simulation, including the different generations of procedures dedicated to it, which are able to give different levels of realism in this matter. Very fine. Yes, let's try to be as quick as possible. We start from linear optics because we want to come at a lighting and shadowing simulation procedure that be as simple as possible. It's a good guess to try to find out something by revising a little bit basic principles of linear optics. Now, essentially, linear optics has two basic assumptions: that it's all paraxial approximation, and the lens is described univocously by its focal distance. This is the focal distance, and the lens clearly is perfectly symmetric. From the basics of linear optics, so we can it all generalizes immediately from a two-dimensional setting to three-dimensional setting, so that we can practically work on completely separate axes, so that all our examples, if we can use some basic notions of linear optics to create a lighting simulation procedure and all underlying theory, we can immediately generalize it to 3 dimensions, so that we don't have full 3 dimensions, so that we don't have to mess up everything with 3-dimensional figures, and it immediately applies. Okay. Basically, the idea of linear optics is that a light source goes through a system of thin lenses. A thin lens is described by its focal distance. And clearly, a thin lens can be convex or concave. This is a convex lens. Its shape is pretty typical. Here, the two focal distances. Clearly, its behavior is completely symmetric, whether the light ray impacts from here or from here. And we have also concave types of lenses. The paraxial approximation essentially says that this is considered to be spherical, and that the angle of incidence of the light rays most of the times is very nearly perpendicular to the surface of the lens. It's called thin lens because it's considered, and just look at this figure, it's considered actually a completely thin ideal piece of surface, which just performs the following operation, which we will be showing to you. Just keep in mind this, okay, the original figure, and let me overlay this piece of paper to get to an explanation. Now, convex lens, what does a convex lens do? It does bring a light ray which impacts perpendicular to it into the focus point of its at the other side, and clearly this guy here just continues going. Well, most important thing why we start from geometric optics, because it will teach us some interesting things. How can we operate? It's so simple. It's a light source is considered point shape, an ideal point shape, and it emits an infinity of light rays. Clearly, the intensity of light ray arriving at an infinitesimally small piece of surface far removed from it is clearly proportional to the original number, an infinite number of light rays coming out of it, divided by 4πr square here, because that's it. Light rays don't, in the world, so many are emitted, so many arrive somewhere, as many are emitted by the light source. But geometric optics is good because it really doesn't get much into its reasonings on light rays, light intensity, and so on. It lets us pretty much freedom to operate in the most convenient way with light rays. In fact, in order to understand how a system of lenses, let's say, transforms a point's position after it has passed through the lenses, it's sufficient to consider just two light rays, the two most convenient ones. So where does this point go? Focal point. What goes through the focal point is instead remitted by a convex thin lens perpendicularly towards the other side. Where does this point go? Here, as intersection. P1 first, when it has crossed the other lens. This itself becomes again a light source. It's a copy of this. It's a transmission of it. Also, this has same number of ideal light rays emitted, and here comes the nice thing, but we have only used 2 fucking lights, rays of light to understand where it goes, and the other rays that impact on the lens and go here, we know what it does. It just builds up to form a copy of this here. Now let me be quick. It's I can't be so coherent and explain so well as a book, but that's it. Now how to treat now an already copied point, so it's not copied, it's copied, but in a different positions. It's a new light source, then goes through the other lens, and so on. Since this is his light source, just which are the 2 most convenient? You just take this one, throw the focal point, and it goes here, fantastic. Just be very careful with the signs. Now look up this on a book. Now I have assumed this and this both are convex lenses. Let's say the other. What does a concave lens? Just quickly, let me draw here. Concave lens does something very crazy, apparently. Look. All the rays that come in, so this bitch just takes it and it emits it so outward along the direction which is this, the impact point here of the perpendicular light ray, and there's this focal point here. Okay, and this bitch just does so, and clearly by deduction, if we have instead a light ray so along this direction, it just focuses symmetrically. So it's just an application of symmetry. It's crazier than this one, but it's him. Okay, we again have a system of a combination of convex and concave lenses. But what we learned from the lesson is it's sufficient to consider the most convenient, those light rays which are most convenient to treat in this fully geometrical mathematical model. We won't be using lenses in our lighting edge shadowing systems, but it can also do the simulation of an effect of a lens, yes, and all these things are good, but it's just a question of footballing around with these basic concepts to implement a simulator interactive one. But we don't. From video games is essentially, yeah, the world is not made of light emitting point shaped light sources, but triangles. But yeah, a triangle is a fucking triplet of points, and yeah, we find where a system of lenses just transports these points. It will be somewhere here, just let me draw it, and so on. Let's color it fucking green, and that's all. Look, just we do this game of transformation. It impacts here, it goes here, it goes here, and then emits light, and we find where the points are transformed and so on. Clearly we don't, in linear optics, we don't have these effects like unfocused things and curvatures. The things are a more advanced topic. Generally, yeah, just be careful. Revise this on a book, which can be more coherent than I can in a bunch of minutes here, and let's go on. Yeah, what we learned is a light source which may be fully directional, full free, or spotlight, like limited to a solid angle, to emit light on a solid angle. The solid angle thing is the most important for us. Now, we saw that we have light rays, which are straight and go, as in linear optics, or just start with this guess. They start off from the source and reach an obstacle and illuminate it. Okay. Let me be as quick as possible. Clearly, a target in a linear optic thing could be just another point, but in a three-dimensional video game and simulated world, that's not the case. It's made of fucking triangles. In a two-dimensional example, triangle is the equivalent of a triangle is a line, a segment. What do we do here? We identify the segment not as an infinity of points to reach, even if that would be correct, but just we identify it with its barycenter or one of the edges or one of its endpoints or whatever. I consider it that's the barycenter. Okay. So, light source illuminates triangles identified by the barycenter. Fantastic. Problem is, what if we have a non-convex thing? We have mentioned that, yeah, in the old generation thing, it's considered that light source is comfortably illuminating the inside walls of a convex polyhedron. So we just see this distance, we see where it is, and we have the normal vector of our triangle. We have the incidence direction. So we see how much of this direction is parallel to this and give a color according to it. A triangle or is illuminated or not, and the intensity is given by, well, the light source distance. Now, you know that yeah, intensity, let's write it. Okay, the intensity of the light source originally, without bringing into discussion the measurement, you know, all that 4p r 4 r square, the distance r. Okay, it's a distance, that's all. This can be also ignored. There are different lighting models, but this is a pretty good thing. One can also put another constant here. This is a, you know, it's the surface of the sphere. That's, if it confuses you, just invent your own model. Okay. Okay, we do this thing for each triangle. The projection, normal versus source stuff is fundamental. And we calculate each how much is illuminated, and we have our nice thing. Problem is, yeah, it's good in this case, even very good. If the small triangles are small, it's very good. We have all those things, like when you do the torchlight, it does these kinds of shapes or the spherical, and you can play, do a nice big triangulated surface and try to obtain this different shapes, or also this one, you know, this kind of, when one plays with a torchlight and illuminates a wall of an obscure room. But this model doesn't work when we have an obstacle in the middle. That is when we are in a completely generic non-convex setting. What to do? This will give a wrong prediction, because by applying to each triangle identified by its barycenter and normal vector and all that stuff, it will give wrong results, even if we may consider that the illumination goes on only when the normal vector to the triangle has opposite the projection of this into this is negative. But it will predict the previous model, let's call it the generation 1 model, let's call this instead that we will be working with generation 2. It will predict that this obstacle has not stopped light, and this will be fully illuminated also. And also this one. Even if these were smaller triangles, this obstacle would be as if there had been nothing. The light is just illuminates every triangle just according to this simple model, and well, that's sometimes gives crazily wrong predictions, like just I have tried to show in episode 2 and in that video game. And well, what to do? So this we are taught to think in a monodirectional way and just apply methods, but what can we do? The solution could be reasoning on linear optics, the basics. But sometimes we can also go contrary in that direction, but a prediction procedure cannot just consider this direction that my light source emits and what is emitted arrives. We can also say it arrives from where. We assume we know where it arrives, as also the fact that light travels in a straight way is just an assumption. It's an observation. We just see, but where can it arrive? First of all, we can just find out an intersection, an event of stopped light ray. But we can also say, yeah, the triangle, each triangle has one light ray arriving at it. Which are these light rays? In the whole linear optics stuff, we have been doing the whole job with just 2 fucking light rays. Now, would we be misled by this? No. Well, we can say, yeah. We have, clearly, if we try to draw every light ray coming at a target, hey, what are the most significant light rays for us? Are those which connect the light source with a target where it arrives, or it may arrive. Okay. And looking at this figure, we can just find out by some creativity that we can solve this problem if we consider it all backward. We take the center of every triangle, very center, and just connect it with the light source. Okay, this won't be illuminated because the spotlight, the angle is outside the spotlight limits. Okay, this won't be illuminated because it's outside. This will be illuminated. There's also this, we can say yes, Yes, it's still on the limit, but it's there. And this one, well, it in the first generation model it would be, but we just realized that, hey, we are doing it on the backwards. Remember, I've drawn every lightly on the contrary from the target to the source, and up here we have an intersection, and so prediction says no. We find an intersection because we go from the target to the light source and say this won't be illuminated. This, not either. This, no. And so we will do a pretty good prediction also of shadow. Because what are shadows? What is a shadow? A shadow is the light which has not arrived because it was stopped by an obstacle. That's a shadow. Okay. But since triangles in a video game usually tend to be very few, and the more distant parts of the scenario they represent, the larger they are. And so we have here some shadows, but they are so unfocused usually that they even don't give the impression that they are actual shadows. Shadow is light which has not arrived because has been blocked by an obstacle. But this predicts correctly also shadows. If we have infinitesimally small triangles, it does a perfect shadowing and lighting simultaneously. So, generation 2 lighting and illumination system is the key for the third generation one. And the third generation one does nothing but just reinforces, elaborates a bit on the second generation one, so that it says the world is made of triangles, but they are textured. And so, well, what can we do? We say, okay, a light source does not illuminate just triangles, but single textured texels of each triangle of the world. And we still use the same procedure. It's slower, much slower because we have lots of texels, but we use the mapped texture triangle, which is, if it's very far, we have just two divisions. It's fucking small. When we have closer things, we have usually a finer texture, so we will have more rays to check for, let's say, intersection with other triangles of the world. We'll have to calculate the light intensity arriving more times, but if we use heavy map mapping with a little bit of extra computational cost, we will be able to simulate lighting in a way that it creates much sharper shadows. But the fact is, the difficulty that we have also each time when we have calculated at a single pixel how much light arrives, we will have to remake the texture all the time, and this can be a problem. We just have to take the texture for each, calculate how much light arrives at it, and we will have a nice, still squarish outlined shadow things, but it's nice. We will have shadows which are a little bit like this, you know. But if we refine the texture, we get always smoother textures, so that when it's enough distant, we just becomes one single line drawn with some pixels of the screen. The other things are details. I hope it's been interesting. Revise these things of optics. 3, 2, 1, ready, go, and finally get to play some fucking video games, yeah! 3, 2, 1, go. Very fine. We have 5 minutes left for a very quick gameplay of Rigs of Rods 0.35. Essentially, you're presented with a very simple initial scenario. A man whom we can control and at the same time get some exercise with how to use the very complex camera control system. Okay, in this game, clearly the controls are among the most complex that I've ever seen. It's just half a step, we could say, below the complexity of the controls in a typical realistic flight simulator. Very fine. You can get in the vehicle and drive it. The controls are just, in one word, perfect, but they are also just to start with an impression sentence. Yeah, just in order to be able to start a game, beyond being able to steer it with the arrows, we have to at least have a quick look at the manual. Yeah. Okay. This instrument panel is a stylistic representation of the most basic control systems in a truck or any other vehicle. This is a bit more complex because it's truck. Now, this is just an extract of the reference manual. Okay, I know now everything by memory, so just to show you the game, well, we have to turn on the electricity system and press start, press S button, keep it pressed in order to start the engine. Now, the sounds in this game are just impressive. Meanwhile, let me start. The camera control must be underhand all the time we draw. We have more views. The most important one is the external one because we have the reference of the instrument panel, and the other is the internal view, where we have also mirrors, but I had to deactivate them because I had a huge kick to the computational cost of this game to run well. Now, okay. The view angle impacts on the performance of the game. The control of the vehicle is clearly flawless. There's a huge pool of vehicles and also airplanes, but the control and realism of the airplanes is not all that big kick, but the simulation of especially the heavy vehicles is a big kick. And yeah, we can the game is very difficult to control because we need to have underhand all the time we drive, all the camera control system, and we also have to look at the mirrors, even if now they are deactivated, and we have to just control everything. And we also need to be ready to change the view, because sometimes clearly we need to see if we are driving where we actually intend to go. Very good in its field of application, and can offer a lot of fun. There isn't much more to say about the game because the content is in much of its usage. An advanced user can find more content in this game. One flaw may be that of the impossibility to move the head of the driver, whose point of view we have here proposed, but maybe future versions that has been inserted. Yeah, vehicles can brake, but the way they break depends on how detailed the model is, and that's fine. Clearly the graphics is good, very essential, and let's enjoy fully this game. Very fine. This is all. This was Simon, alias the Nerd of Algorithms, and well, see you soon. Hope you liked it. Bye bye.